I guess I'm going to back up and answer the progress being made as it relates to the professional workforce in a cybersecurity context. And let's just be honest, we have a very young profession. It truly is. You know, I can remember my first. I was blessed by being in the intelligence community, and very early on, we were doing some really neat networking things with, you know, at the days as the internet was coming by, we were using what we called Mosaic at the time as a browser, and we were sharing information and doing some really neat networking things. And at that time, you could see security was starting to happen in desktop environments and mini computing. But the reality was it's a very young profession. And so we've all been pioneering things. And I think we've had some progress early on. We recognized the need not only to have some training, but to have some certifications. But I think we stalled our progress. I think it's been pretty quiet for a while, probably too long, because technology changes a lot faster than people. And we've had a need for a lot of specialization. And we kind of built a lot of certifications around generalists. And so we got to a place where the specialized technical skill sets are very important. And it's been a very small field of people who had the aptitude and got the experiences, and, you know, it was magic. If I asked anyone who's really successful, well, how did you become successful? It was different every time. It was like, I had the benefit of having this one project where I got this neat challenge, and I worked with this person, and I learned a bunch, and it was something that was not repeatable. And obviously, we need to scale, and so that doesn't work. The analogy I like to think about and use, because we're at this precipice where everyone realizes that everyone needs security professionals to help them, because technology is that instrumental to a lot of the new business strategies and a lot of the new models, and the government needs it. And we have Cyber Command, and now the military is saying we need 10,000. The Air Force always, hubris, you know, we're going to have 20,000 cyber warriors. We're going to grab a bunch of radio guys. We're going to make them cyber warriors. But this idea that, hey, we need to do this, and it's got to be repeatable. Right, you know, and so yeah, I think the analogy I think about medicine in the early, you know, 1908 time frame, where they had 6-week surgeons. You could go to you know, they had schools because it was an aristocratic profession. So if you came from the right family, went to the right teaching university, you know, you became a doctor. And then they had, you know, they didn't have enough doctors, so they had to open it up to have the common country doctor. And you had a 6-week surgeon program, and you learned how to be a surgeon. And lo and behold, you took someone to the wrong hospital, and lots of people were dying. And they figured, well, this is a terrible problem, so we need to clearly make sure these hospitals have, you know, standards. And so they turned to the hospitals and said, you guys have to do your jobs better. And they added standards to hospitals. And look, because Johns Hopkins worked fine. Not as many people died at Johns Hopkins. I guess the leeches were better over there, you know. And so at the end of this thing, though, they realized that, you know, these hospitals are meeting these standards, but people are still dying. What's going on? And they said, wait, it's the doctors. You know, we got to figure out how to certify these doctors. And it took a long time. I mean, to be fair, it took 20 to 30 years for, you know, National Board of Medical Examiners and for those types of initiatives and certifications to develop. And at first, the doctors resisted them greatly. I said, wait a minute, I do this job, you know, why tell me to do something? Of course, licensing came along. That was a helpful driver. But I asked the CEO of NBME, who was on a history project to go back in the early days of 1916 when they started it, and he said it wasn't about licensing that drove the certification to be successful. It was that these practitioners got together that were well respected, mostly in the teaching hospitals, and they said, we need higher standards, mostly because it was almost like they needed to protect their profession and their standing in society, saying we can't have these 6-week surgeons. And lo and behold, over time, doctors saw it as a sense of prestige and of their profession. We too are that important, and so I think we too need progress. And I think it's going to come down to the practitioners. And in areas, there's still some specialties out there that are like little niches where you have some of the people you've heard from in the last 2 days where not many people can do what they do. They have a tremendous aptitude. But in areas where that field starts to fill in and you start having to do this in greater scale, like general security testing of systems, not to belittle that, it still takes lots of skill to do that. You need much more people. You need to be able to develop them. And in those cases, those professionals are at a breaking point where they're saying, we are being caught by the race to the bottom, where 23-year-olds with vulnerability scanners are saying, here we are, we perform, you know, full scope operational security test, and they're paying, you know, of course companies want to pay $20,000 and get the Okay, I got my check, I did my diligence. Boy, the findings are pretty light. It all came from this tool. We ran the tool ourselves beforehand. We can get these fixed. We look good for the audit committee. There's some of that going on, but the real professionals of the field are saying, look, this race to bottom is hurting the real buyer who wants to really know risk with the system, and it's hurting our profession because when we walk in and we say, that's a $170,000 test, they go, are you kidding me? We had 2 guys in here yesterday that said that's $30,000. See you later. So I think the professionals are ready for it too.
Thank you. Gail, did you have a question?
I was curious about your thoughts about some of the efforts that have been ongoing for years in the, I guess, the workforce development. Security certification isn't new. CISSPs, ISACA, SANS certs, particular product certs. You know, I'm curious on the workforce side if you think it's just a customization or modification of those efforts, or if there's something completely different needed. And then on the product side, admittedly, there's less out there, but there are some things. For example, ISCI, which is a spin-off of ISA, the Automation Society, has been working for a couple of years and is almost at the finish line of doing embedded device security testing, where they test the stack robustness, functional requirements, security development lifecycle. I'm curious on the product side if you see that as a model for what needs to be done in smart grid, or if there's some differences we need.
I'm going to take the people first.
Okay, the people first. Try to be a little more succinct in my answers here. I do think we need something.
You're the last event, so
yeah.
you're the one that has to catch the plane.
Yeah, yeah, that's funny. I do think we need something a little different, Dale, in areas where it makes sense to have something different. So some of the existing certifications serve purposes, and I think those purposes do get served. Some of them, you know, some of them are associated with training. You mentioned SANS. So really the purpose behind the certification is that they've got, I think, very high quality training courses, but the certification just demonstrates that you've onboarded the learning objectives. That's the test is an achievement test focused on, did you do that? Other certifications are more domain wide, so in a breadth of knowledge for a domain, you should know these things. And I think those are important. But in some of these more technical jobs where you really need to know, can the person deliver, you know, do the job, I think you need to move to aptitude testing, and that's what we're trying to do through some performance-based exams, is to start capturing and measuring the aptitude of the ability to do the work. For example, in Cisco, for the product vendors, they have a number of certifications that some of them are more training-based or, you know, achievement-oriented, but they have the CCIE, which, you know, it's very expensive and it doesn't scale well, but they bring you into a room and they say, there's a network, here are the problems, you need to go fix it and demonstrate you can fix it. And it's a very coveted, I mean, after that, you earn that certification, your salary can go up quite a bit. I think, so it's not a unique concept. I mean, Cisco's doing it with that CCIE, but it's not very scalable. What I'm thinking, I think we need as a difference is in the areas of job function related, not focused on, you know, a specific solution like a Cisco environment. And it gets really tough because the simulation environment or the testing environment that you'd go demonstrate what you're doing, the hard part about security, and security testing was the best one to take on first, which we did, was it's easier to do a bounded approach. So you say, here's 3 tools because we designed the target system to work with these 3 tools, and show us how you use it. Well, like I said, there's lots of paths to success. Some people custom develop their own tools. Some people like to use a Linux platform, some Windows platforms. And so getting into a place where you can bring anything to the table to demonstrate how you perform the work is tough. So my business model is awful, until I'll admit that right off the bat. But I think we do need that different step.
From the hardware side, with the various labs that are FIPS compliant, common criteria qualified, their processes are definitely very good for testing products, hardware, software. What they are testing against, if I would go to, say, Oak Ridge National Labs, and do a test, and then take the same type of hardware and software and go to ICSA or ICSI, I don't know what tests they're doing so that I could compare the labs. And from the smart grid cybersecurity side, that's what's missing, is not the same test plans, because you don't want to stifle creativity and how they're testing or the value add. But the baseline testing is missing right now in the smart grid cybersecurity from those various labs. They have the certifications of the FIPS, like I said, the common criteria, and a few of the others that are out there, but what they're testing against is different. So it's starting, but we still need to do a lot of progress from the smart grid cybersecurity standardization for the testing. That still has a ways to go.
I have a question to Michael. What is the National Board of Information Security Examiners? Can you tell a little bit
About what it is? Yeah,
what it
sure.
is, what's the goal, how it might be related to cyber, to smart grid security, and to utility from my point of view.
Yep,
And
very
by
quick.
the way, I realized that I'm old because I remember Mosaic. It was
We
way
think, you know,
before,
right,
so-
right, yeah, there you go. Yeah, it was. NBIC, very briefly, is a not-for-profit that was incorporated in June. So when I left NERC, that's when I went, locked my way in Idaho and created a Maryland not-for-profit. It's focused, it is applying as a 501c3, so in IRS tax code, it's set up to be a research institute to work at helping the community progress in this area. There's also incorporating a 501c6 that can administer examinations. Its goal is overarching. It's cybersecurity in the larger sense. It came from the Cybersecurity Commission for the 44th presidency. Some of the findings said we need a not-for-profit to focus on some of these things. I've worked with I have a good board of trustees that I said, you know, I don't want to, we shouldn't go after everything that's in the report. I think what we need to do is this aptitude testing, performance-based examinations, and where it applies and makes sense in a more, you know, a limited fashion, and then conduct research around defining the jobs and the competencies. So where there's an intersect with smart grid, I couldn't walk away from this energy stuff and electric utility. It's just too warm place in my heart, even after the NERC experience. Can you believe that? I do want to walk away, just not too far. So the project that we started is the DOE. We have a DOE hopefully funded project that will start, that will focus on defining a competency model for smart grid security specialists, so operational security in a smart grid environment, and work with industry and industrial psychologists to develop the model to do critical incident analysis, so looking at use and misuse cases, just like you might do with hardware, and then maybe be poised to be able to develop an assessment instrument to inform how to best develop that workforce. So that's the area on the Research Institute that we're hoping to work with electric utilities and in the smart grid context. So.
Thank you. I just wanted to, you know, emphasize the point that was brought up about, you know, certifications not necessarily meaning anything in terms of competence in a particular area. You know, I'm CISSP certified, and I could probably convince somebody to hire me as a pen tester and pay me a lot of money, and that would not be money well spent. So, you know, and again, to many people, to many organizations, you know, many utilities, really, you know, they say, oh, CISSP, that's a minimum requirement for DOD, and, you know, it must be good, you know, and, you know, again, it's like MD, you know, you hire a foot specialist, you don't necessarily want him to do an open heart surgery. You know, you got to really dig a little deeper, and there has to be some sort of a method, you know, something they can go to and say, you know, this is how we actually determine, you know, whether or not this is
right. And there's a time and place for it. I mean, what we can't do is try to anticipate and develop a standard and control innovation and what people do at jobs and define jobs. You can't do that. There's some, you know. There's people who like to go out there and say, well, we see this as the next cutting edge thing, we have to have a certification. Well, the work still needs to be pioneered and defined what it is and what, you know, what is successful job performance, you know, what's the criteria. But there are areas where we need to scale a workforce and know it has the level of competency. People really get very upset by it in some ways for different reasons. Some ways, you know, up to $50,000 for a certain certification. You go, I don't know what this is a measure of. And in other cases, and again, they serve certain purposes. In other cases, you get kind of bothered like, well, who's, you know, telling me what my job is? But the other problem is, you know, we have certifications for like nail groomers, okay? You sit there and you think, God, we must be more important than that in relative society. And the last thing that I would really like to see done, and maybe this is just my frustration for operating in boardrooms, is that when the lawyer gave his legal opinion, and I knew 95% of people in the room didn't understand what he meant by the argument that he was making. They took it as a qualified opinion. But whenever the CISO was asked to make the point, it was just kind of like, have no idea how to qualify that. You know, I think I hear what you're saying, not completely sure. That's the area that I would love to see this profession raised in our area, where these are qualified opinions by the folks that are trusted to be the key advisors to decision makers about what we need to do in terms of decisions.
That's right.
That's